don't think I've ever spoken in front of a group this big. Let me tell you a little something about myself. Like I said, I'm Ed Berry. I work for the Marion County Assessor's Office. And when I was in college, I had a little job with the assessor, and they put me in the map room because I learned how to read maps in the Boy Scouts. I was going to school at night at IUPUI, and since I was working in the map room, I ended up getting a degree in geography along the way. And unfortunately, I'm still in the map room. I've asked this question to a couple people, and I think I already got the answer, but does everybody here do the maps, land splits and things in their auditor's offices? And I'm asking because when we got our new computer system about 5 years ago, they have different fields for the assessor, the treasurer, the auditor, and we all have to go into the auditor's field to do any kind of land transfers. And that's because in Marion County, and we heard that Marion County was the only county that does this, is that the assessor does the land transfers instead of the auditor. And I guess that's why I'm here today. Anyway, we're here to talk about legal descriptions, and we'll start off with a definition of what is a legal description. A legal description is a land description, and that's what it's called originally. It usually comes from a survey, and you know, it is the words that describe a piece of land that somebody's buying. It doesn't really become a legal description until it's recorded. So, we'll go on. Here we go. What's a bad legal? I came across this one when I was trying to put this together. Can you read what that legal is? Part of Section 13, Township 17, Range 2, beginning 382 feet to the southeast of the southwest corner, and that's all it says. Now, if that came through on a deed, would anybody in here pass it?
Only if it's tax sale.
Yeah, we see a lot of those. This is actually an oil refinery that's worth several $1 million. And I tried to find a good legal description, but I couldn't find one for it. And that came straight off the property record card. Here's another example of a bad legal. And this is something that's downtown in Indianapolis. Can anybody tell me what's wrong with this? We'll get to the outlots in just a minute here. Those are just some sections of downtown. That's how they're named. Well, anyway, I'll make it short. There's only 3 calls on here, so that you don't have a call that makes it come back and close. Normally, it should, this is the same legal with the 4th call on it that makes it close. And that's, you know, one thing about a legal description. That's a great thing about your GIS, is that you can get it on there and draw it out as you go. Now, here we go. Would this be a good legal? Would this be a good legal? Okay. This was taken straight off of a property record card, too. This is the plan of Indianapolis that Alexander Ralston drew in 1821. It's not any plat book because they didn't have plat books then. There's 101 squares and 1 circle on here. That's Monument Circle, of course. So, like somebody said a minute ago, if that came through on a deed, it would probably pass. If it came through on a tax sale deed, it would pass. And if that came through on a regular deed, it would probably pass. Now, it should be written like this. Square 58 of the donation lands. Does anybody know what the donation lands are? Okay, and I've seen that term used for a couple of different cities. These are the donation lands of the city of Indianapolis. When Indiana became a state in 1816, the federal government, through the Enabling Act of 1816, donated 4 sections of land to the state of Indiana to enable them to establish a capital along the national road. And these are those lands. I actually measured this out one day when I didn't have a whole lot to do on the AutoCAD, and it is almost exactly 4 square miles. So yeah, it is 4 sections, even though, you know, you got a little bit over here west of White River that doesn't make it perfectly square up. Is anybody here from Indianapolis? Okay. Do you know what's in square 58 of the donation lands? So if that came through on a deed, it wouldn't be of any concern? That's the city-county building. It's the seat of city government. So if that came through on a deed, I think it would be of concern to a few people. Well, anyway, those are just some examples of, what can come through on a deed that might be transferred. I mean, if that Square 58 came through on a deed, our office would probably transfer it because that's what's on the property record card. And there's no plat book or page associated with it. I've seen that the city of Southport, which is also in Marion County, has donation lands associated with it. So sometimes there are, things that are exceptions to the rule. Okay, now, surveying in Indiana. Indiana was the first state that was completely surveyed by the rectangular survey system in the United States. The surveys, the principal meridians, the first principal meridian in America is the boundary line between Indiana and Ohio. The second one goes basically right through the center of Indiana, and the baseline goes across the bottom. Everything is measured from that point, and it's about 7 miles south of Paoli, Indiana. But that's where you get your section township ranges, where they go north and then east and west. They're all either north of the baseline and east of the principal meridian or south and west of it. And we'll get into more of that in a minute here. Okay, and here's why surveying is important. Every legal description is based on a survey. I mean, it means that somebody's gone out there and actually walked the land. Now, a lot of these surveys will be in your office as plats of cities and towns, and that's where you get your lot numbers and things like that, instead of the long legal descriptions that describe big tracts of land. The public land survey system, and Indiana was the first one that was completely done by this, applies to most of the states that were not part of the 13 colonies. The 13 colonies and some of the earlier settled lands were all described in meets and bounds. And these are really old meets and bounds. They're not like the ones we're going to get here that give you section corners. I mean, they go back to the ancient way of doing it. Yeah, you start at a rock here and then you go along the creek to a bridge. There's some problems with those, and like I said, we'll get to those in a minute. Now, originally when they started surveying out here, I mean, they started in Ohio, and you can see it was kind of an experiment, and that's why it's all chopped up like that. The reason that they were doing all these surveys out here was that after the Revolutionary War, they had these vast tracts of land in what was the Northwest Territories, what later became Indiana, and the federal government thought that in order to erase their debt from the war, that they could sell all this land, but they needed a way to describe it. They couldn't do it with meets and bounds because there's no landmarks out in undeveloped territory, so they developed this, rectangular survey system. And like I said, Indiana was the first state that was completely surveyed this way. The public land survey system divides up the land into townships, and they're all 36 square miles. Now, I know everybody's going to sit here and say, well, my township's not. We'll get to that in a minute. But they're all measured north from the baseline, north and east, or south, or west. But everything's divided up into grids like this. It makes everything a whole lot easier to, make plots from. The townships themselves are further divided into sections of 1 square mile each. Each township is, 6 miles high, 6 miles deep. And they number the sections in them going in a switchback fashion, starting in the northeast corner, and they end in the southeast corner. There should be 36 sections or 36 square miles in each township. Now, the government townships versus civil townships. I mean, that's where, there's 9 townships in Marion County, and none of them are 36 square miles. The government townships are 36 miles square, and the ranges are also 6 miles square. Most civil townships contain either parts of numerous counties. To illustrate that, here's Marion County. Now, the government townships, you can see there are in the red lines. See how nice and square they are? But the civil townships are the heavy blue lines. You can see down there in the southwest corner where 2 of the townships are actually divided by the river instead of by, section township range lines. And the different townships in Marion County, they all have different areas. None of them are 36 square miles. None of them match a government township. Can you see the little offset to the north up there? Does anybody know what that is? That's because of a correction corner. Every 4 townships that they go north, they have to make adjustments for the curvature of the earth, so they have to shift the lines over a little bit. In fact, every township is going to actually be about 50 feet shorter on its north line than it is on its south line. And when you get to the end of one of those township lines, which are 24 miles, you're going to be about 200 feet short. So they have to make corrections for that, and they do. And that's what they're called, correction corners. You know, Pastor, nearly all the land in Indiana is described in one of 3 ways. The first is the subdivision and lot, and these are the easiest. I mean, you know, it's just like lot 6 in Smith Sub. The second is the Alkiot part, and that's where they divide up the townships or the sections into various pieces, where you get your northwest quarter, your southwest quarter, the northeast quarter of the southeast quarter, and they just keep dividing it down. And the final one is meets and bounds, which are always the most difficult. Now, the meets and bounds that we use here in Indiana is not quite like the ones that they used in the original 13 colonies. And that's because we have those good section corners to begin our measurements from. Subdivision and lot system, which is used in the United States and Canada, is usually used in cities where it's too dense to get you know, divide things up in really small pieces as far as meets and bounds go. You're gonna, you know, the other names for these are parcel maps, the land maps, tax maps, and these are usually what you have in your office that people come in and want to look at. Like I said, and they're real easy to find because they all have names. There's just an example of one. That's a little illustration I got from the surveyor's office. And here's an example of one. Lot numbered 14 in Merritt's plat of the town of Southport. And they got the plat book and page in there. This one actually had the parcel number and the address on there. Now, those don't really need to be on there. I mean, as long as it's got a good legal description, it can be transferred. Okay, and here's the second kind, the Alkiot part. And as you can see, they're deeding off half of the northeast quarter of the northwest quarter. And sometimes you'll see legal descriptions like that. In fact, here's one that I came across. Oh, well, okay. Here's a section of 640 acres, and it shows all the subdivisions that can be named, you know, as you get it down. And you can even go, you can even break it down further than that. And how many people get deeds that are like this, just, you know, like the northwest quarter? Okay, we still get a few of these in Marion County. As subdivided and as built up as it is, we still get a few of these in Marion County. Here was one I got the other day. This was, well, actually this came in 2011, but I had to look it up for somebody. And yeah, they just pare it down by half quarter and half quarter until they get to the desired part. I can't find a picture of that because all this was railroad property, and they had like 10 or 12 legal descriptions on there. So it's all been combined since then, and it's just, you know, you had to put it together like a jigsaw puzzle. Okay, meets and bounds. These are the hard ones. And the meets and bounds described here looks pretty easy. It's just, you know, you get a place of beginning, and then just, you know, it tells you which way to go and how far to go and then when to turn, and it should always come back and close. So, yeah, the meets and bounds system had been used in England for many centuries and is still used in the definition of general boundaries. By custom, it applies to the original 13 colonies and many other land jurisdictions that are based on English common law. System typically uses features of the local geography along with directions and distances to define and describe boundaries of parcel land. Boundaries running in a prose style, working around in sequence from a point of beginning and returning to the same point. And it says here, I love this, compare it with the oral ritual of beating the bounds. Does anybody know what that means? In medieval Europe, my first degree was in history, They didn't have very many written documents, and so people would define the land that they owned and farmed. They would take their children out who were expected to inherit it, and they would actually walk the bounds of the property, and on the corners, they would beat them until they knew where they were. This is the God's truth. I learned that in history class. Okay, where are we at here? Okay, yeah, the term meets refers to a boundary that is defined by the measurement of each straight run. The bounds are a more general boundary along certain water courses and things. And this is one of the reasons why meets and bounds legals, like the ones that begin with, start at a rock and then go to the barn and then to the big tree. And you will find those in lots of places. Those are no good because sometimes those boundaries can move. In fact, there was a story that when they came up to do some of the original surveys from Indiana, they paddled up in canoes and they put down rocks to mark, the original spots and, to be able to find their way back. And they couldn't find their way back because they all sank in the mud because they built Indianapolis on a swamp. Okay. Now here's a sample meets and bounds description. And this is a sketch of it. It gives you a point of beginning, and it runs all the way around it, and it comes back to the point of beginning. And it starts at the corner of the section, comes down to the point of beginning, and then goes all the way around. Now that written legal is right here. And this legal is probably not like one you're going to see on many deeds because it uses a lot of different terms and a lot of different variations. It gives you some bearings, and then it gives you some deflection angles, and it also gives you some distances that are not part of the, not actually part of the legal, of the parcel that's going to be transferred. It's like right there in the middle, it says to a point 180 feet distant from the section line. And you will see that sometimes on legals. And then it comes all the way down, and the last call, it just says thence north of the point of beginning, and it gives you no measurement. But it will close. I mean, if you're just saying, okay, and then you just go north of the point of beginning. So there's all sorts of different ways to describe people or a parcel in here. And this was written, you can see I got the guy who wrote it there at the bottom, and I'll give you some more on that here at the end. But yeah, this is a legal description, and it was probably chosen and written this way so that you can get you can get as many different variations on how to make a call in it as possible. Okay, and here we go. Circles and arcs. You said you didn't want to. Okay. My best advice on circles and arcs would be to get a good AutoCAD and have it do it for you. Mm-hmm. Okay, in figure 2 there, it's got, like a compass rose. And this is where we get some of the bearings you hear on legal descriptions. Bearings should always start with north or south, and then go a certain degrees east or west. And that will tell you which way you're going, but they should never have more than 90 degrees in them. They should never start east and west and then go north. Some of them do. Sometimes you will get a bearing that will be forced to go there. But usually your initial bearings will usually be always start with north or south and then go east and west and give you the minutes and degrees. There's some more of the information on arcs and curves, but we'll get into, okay, here we go with bearings and deflections. Okay, in land surveying, a bearing is a clockwise or counterclockwise angle between north or south and a direction. For example, it says north 57 degrees east, south 51 degrees east, south 21 degrees west. And most of the time on angles, you're going to see, not only the degrees, but you'll see the minutes and seconds also. It says here, a surveyed bearing will never have more than 90 degrees. Now, you will see on some legals a direction that is more than 90 degrees, and that's what you call a deflection. And a deflection, rather than a bearing, is not a compass bearing, but it takes into account how many degrees you're going to go from the point that you're standing as if you're looking straight ahead. And these usually don't have minutes and seconds in them. They're a much more general direction, and these can have more than 90 degrees. But they should never have more than 180 degrees, because that would mean that you're just turning around and going back down the same line you already came on. And there's an example of that here. This is taken from a deed that I saw the other day, and that's the first part of it. Actually only gets you to the point of beginning. And that's on there. That can take a while sometimes to get to the point of beginning. But if you look here, we got our original deflection's 80 degrees in 15 minutes. And our second degree deflection is 99 degrees in 45 minutes. Now, what happens if you add those two together? Comes up to 180 degrees. And if you look at that piece of property, you can see what they're doing there. See, they're going on an angle, and the western measurement, it's not a 90-degree angle. It's less than 90, and the eastern measurement is. But it's describing parallel lines going off at an angle. So, that's what deflections are as opposed to bearings. Now, you would read that different if it were bearings. And don't ask me how, because I didn't measure it out. Okay, do you guys use the property record cards? Okay, well, I didn't think so. So anyway, these are what the assessors all use. And they have abbreviated legals. Did any of you guys ever use abbreviated legals? Okay. Well, anyway, this is the same legal right here as this two-page one up here. This is what's on the property record card for that parcel. And, it's just been chopped down to where it will fit. I mean, we used to have 250 characters on our computers where we could, we only had 250 characters to be able to put a legal description into a piece of property. And there had to be one of those on every piece of property in the county. Sometimes that got hard, which is probably where we had that one at the beginning where it just said part of the southwest quarter. Okay. Here we go. Somebody asked me about this before we got here, and they're different units of measure. I mean, do you ever get any oddball deeds with, look at this one here. I mean, 36 rods. Do you ever get legal descriptions with rods and chains on them? Here's a breakdown of what some of the units of measure that you'll see on some of the old legal descriptions. Here, this one. This is another part of that railroad deed that I told you about that had the 2.5 acres that was described by quarter and a half. So yeah, we still get these in every now and then. A lot of the older portions of Marion County were, and some of them were actually platted in rods and chains. Anyway, there's a conversion table for some units of measure. Where do you think they get some of these? As you can see here, see the guy with the pole in the middle of this picture? And I didn't get this for fun. The pole and its length was originally called an ox goad. And it's a rod. It's 16.5 feet long. And as you can see in the top of that picture there, the typical team of oxen that they would use to pull a plow had 8. So you needed four lengths of 16.5 feet, and that's actually a chain. They had a chain that long that pulled the plow. I mean, these things, have real historical backgrounds to them. And as you can see in the very corner up there, 10 chains is a furlong. And the name furlong, it's not associated with horse racing. It's actually associated with farming. And that's how long a team of oxen could pull a plow before they got tired. In fact, it would be 1 furrow long. That's how they get the name of it. And if you can see there, a chain by a furlong, if you multiply them together, is 43,560 square feet, which gives us an acre. And that was the amount of work that they could usually expect a team of oxen to do in one day. So all these measurements and a lot of the descriptions go way back to medieval times, but we still use them today. Has anybody gotten any deeds that are in meters yet? Anybody? We've been getting them. And, you know, of all people, it is like the Department of Public Works that's starting to measure stuff in meters. We're getting stuff in the metric system now. Okay, so it's pretty hard to look at this and think, how big is an acre from a description like this? Does anybody know what a good, good comparison to an acre would be? What can you think of that's about as big as an acre? Wait, a football field? You get an A. A football field, like from the goal line to like the 10-yard line, is about as big as an acre. A football field is just a little bit bigger than an acre. So the next time you see one of those, think how many football fields could go in there. So how are we doing on time anyway? Okay. Okay, one of the things I wanted to tell you, a lot of what you read today is from a book. It's called Fundamentals of Land Measurement. And Chicago Title used to put that out. A lot of this came from there, and it's got a lot of other good stuff in it. Let's go back to a few things here. I know somebody had a question about this. Oh, wait a minute. There it was. Okay. Subject any illegal highways or rights of way. What do you do with those on a deed? Usually if it says that on a deed, I mean, I know that we have a lot of places where streets have been widened and, the deed will come through and just say, like they took 5 feet off for the widening of the street. We'll accept that deed even if it doesn't accept that out. So, and there's a lot about easements and right-of-way. Easements really don't matter a whole lot because it doesn't involve the transfer of property. It just involves the rights to go over it. That's the same way with a right-of-way. Roads with right-of-way are put over. I mean, the people will actually own to the center line of the street most of the time in a right-of-way. And even though they own it, they're not taxed for it, which is one of the big things about it.